Hi, and welcome to the History Hut as we continue our discussion on the political history of India. I'm Jim, this is Dr. K, and last time we spoke, we were talking about some of the key Gupta rulers. Tell me a little more about Chandragupta.
Okay, so we were talking about last time Chandragupta II, about 375 to 415. Seems to have been one of the top Gupta rulers, and although he comes to power by killing his brother, the heir, he manages to annex Western India and have access to all the ports as well. So it's really good for the economy. And he uses diplomatic marriages, as kings and rulers often do, marries his daughter into the kind of royal line of the Deccan, and their children, and his own children and his daughter's children all become great patrons of the arts. So he's a really good ruler to look at, and his son Kumara Gupta. The thing that's problematic for him is he faces the first of a new series of threats coming from
the North?
The North. Yeah, I know it's not China, but it's the same kind of deal here. The first threat of a group called the Huns, and we're more familiar with the Huns because we think about Attila the Hun attacking the Roman Empire, but actually the Huns come out of that area that the Mongols come out of, but about 600-800 years earlier than them, but with the same squat, ugly little horses that can go anywhere and look after themselves. So they come out of that area and then they split, and one group goes across the Volga and into the Roman Empire, pushes the Goths in front of them, and that causes, of course, all sorts of problems for the Romans, and we'll talk about that when we get to Europe, but it leads to the sacking of Rome and eventually the fall of the empire. And then the other group splits and comes across the Oxus River and then down through Persia and into India. So the Gupta actually have to face the White Huns. They also have another really good name, the Hephthalites, or you could just call them the Hunas, coming through Central Asia. And so the big threat now is that they're going to cross the Hindu Kush mountains and into the north. And of course the Gupta are going to have to fight really hard. In fact, keep an army in the field for decades, which is really expensive, to keep this threat away. And when the Huns finally break through, they're actually too weakened to have much of an impact at all. And actually Indian rulers are able to kind of get rid of them by about 570 AD. But the fact that they're actually there in India, and that you have to have an army in the field, and that the northern border is really porous. I mean, there's people trading across that area. It's hard to kind of pick out a place that, one place that you could stop them at. So the sense is that each wave of Hun attacks weakens and weakens and weakens the Gupta, especially financially, and so it erodes Gupta control for decades and decades and decades, and they're really never quite the same as they were before. And I'll just mention briefly that the first Hun king in India is a guy called Toramana, and his headquarters was at Sakala, which is just kind of northwest of modern-day Lahore. And he actually conquers a substantial amount of the Indian subcontinent, so he's actually really powerful for a while. And he becomes a Jain, though, so it's kind of interesting. So he conquers most of the subcontinent, really, really violent, and then he gives it all up and becomes a Jain, and takes on the, it's kind of like, oh, I'll never be violent towards people again, and so he just kind of has a complete change of heart. But his son was a kind of more typical of the Huns, and lots of cruelty and massacres under him. And there's a bit of a controversy over whether the White Huns really detested Buddhism or not, because they always get this there's always a sense that they really didn't like Buddhists because the massacres and a lot of the real cruel actions are against the Buddhists. But there's some new research that suggests that no, perhaps this wasn't the case at all. So maybe it was just a kind of overall invasion. And I think, after the Huns break through, then it's possible for other groups to break through as well. But the important thing, I believe, is that it's just so expensive to keep an army, to be kind of ever vigilant in the north, that it really starts to erode the power of the Gupta. So having said that, I just want to mention a few of the kind of legacies of the Gupta in terms of politics and economy, and we'll talk about science in a couple of minutes. I talked about them not being really highly centralized or real absolutist rulers, that they really liked this decentralized system, and we looked at the layers of administration that they had, but they can't really keep up that decentralized rule in the face of this Hun threat. They have to be more active than that. And the quality of life in the north just deteriorates quite dramatically. And of course, there's lots of economic instability as well, because you're kind of constantly facing this horde from the other side. So lots of loss of land at different times. And of course, it has an impact on trade. So trade routes are less secure than they ever were before. So it means that there's less taxes coming into the Gupta rulers. And also after Kumara, they suffer from a string of fairly poor rulers as well. So difficult times in the last part of Gupta rule. But if you were to look at all of the Gupta period, we have some travelers' accounts. Fa Shen, the Chinese Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks are coming out of China and into India looking for original Buddhist manuscripts. And so while they're there, they quite often stay in places for extended periods of time and tell us what life was like. So Fa Shen said that Gupta India was a very free and liberal society, that it had many charitable foundations for the poor, facilities for the poor, that in fact if you were from a particular caste, and in this case I think it was the Vaishya caste, it was expected that you would look after people who were sick, or you would fund a little hospital for them. We talked about Islamic charity as well, so same kind of thing. Said that the subcontinent, as far as he could tell, was full of people that traded and lived in peace, and that there was very little state interference in people's lives, and that would go along quite well with the decentralized rule. That crime was rare and capital punishment was unheard of, and there was very little corruption amongst the officials. And he's also the first of the outsiders to describe the caste system. Oh, yeah, and all of this is found in what's it called, a record of the Buddhist kingdom. So he describes the caste system, and he also talks about the group that we'll be talking about in particular, the untouchables, people at the very bottom. And it's from him that we learn that if you were an untouchable, you had to clap a piece of wood as you went into a town so that other people could get out of your way, so that they're not made impure by any kind of contact with you or with your shadow. So we find out about that. So a good summary of the Gupta period, for the most part, lots of economic prosperity, lots and lots of wealth. Taxes are kept fairly low. The government's very tolerant, well organized governments. They were using gold and silver coins, so again, another sign of their prosperity. They had highly productive agricultural system because of great soil fertility, not because they had special tools for plowing or anything. They're just using very basic methods, but still very highly productive. They become India becomes the textile trade center of the world, really, for its linen and cotton and all those other things, and great tolerance for minorities and for other belief systems. So it doesn't seem to be much persecution of people that lived differently from the Gupta. No discrimination that you can see against the Buddhists and the Jains. So considered to be a bit of a golden age, not so much for women, because if you look at the Code of Manu, that says that women are subject to their fathers and then their husbands and then their sons, that women have restricted access to property rights, that they have to marry early because they have to be chaste, and so there's always that danger if your child or your daughter reaches puberty that she might be a bit wild and bring shame on the family. And of course the other thing about widows, that widows couldn't remarry, which is a problem, because if you have child brides, say you're married at 10 and your husband dies when you're 13, you're not allowed to remarry, so you have to go into an ashram with other widows and then lead a very, 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 very simple life. And the older custom of sati, of widow burning, also seems to gain some speed during the Gupta period. It was there before, but it seems to become more acceptable, and that's when the husband dies and the oldest son lights the funeral pyre, that the widow should throw herself on top of that and burn along with him, and that way she can live with him for 35 million years in the afterlife. Ooh, how exciting. So, and that, of course, is a custom that much later on, when the British are in India, very upset about, but it's difficult to break because by that time it's a kind of cultural tradition. So, lots of opulence and wealth, but of course a lot of people living at subsistence, farming, living at subsistence level as well. And you see long distance trade flourishing on the east and the west coast because of the breakthroughs to the coast, and absolutely incredible architecture through this whole period, and of course after the Gupta era as well. Later on you'll see a fusion of Hindu and Muslim art with absolutely fantastic. Good examples would be the Amber Fort in Jaipur, or the Palace of the Winds. I think that's the best name ever for a building. The Palace of the Winds in Jaipur, the Taj Mahal, of course, in Agra, Humayun's tomb in Delhi, or the Palace of Fatehpur Sikri, just amazing. But before this as well, Jain sculpture, absolutely phenomenal. The chariots you often get stone chariots of the gods with one of the wheels being 10 feet high, and then the whole structure just massive. Really, really intricate stone artwork that's absolutely beautiful. So in architecture as well, a really, really good era.
Well, what can you tell me a little bit about the science from that era?
Okay, so remember when we discussed Islamic science, and I said that scholars from the House of Wisdom had visited India and they're interested in their work in astronomy and maths? Well, it's because of what scholars have been up to in India in the Gupta era in particular. And the key thinker, there's lots and lots, and we could probably go on for as long as we did for Islamic science, but that's not really appropriate. And we've talked about the links between the two, so this should, you've already kind of heard this. So the key thinker is Aryabhata, 476 to about 550, and he taught, he's another polymath interested in mathematics, astronomy, all sorts of things. So he taught that the Earth was round, that it rotated on its own axis, that the Earth revolved around the sun. Remember that when Copernicus and Galileo say that, it's trouble. This guy's saying it 1,000 years before they say that, and he's not getting in trouble because they're not Christians, so there's no big deal. So they said the Earth revolved around the sun. He's the first guy to give a scientific explanation for eclipses. He said it wasn't because of demons at all. I always thought it was, but because the moon comes between the Earth and the sun. Also really important in mathematics, he found sine functions and used them in astronomy, gave the accurate value for pi to the 4th place. He's seen as the kind of father of mathematics in India, and he wrote the world's oldest existing texts using the number 0 as a number, and that's in 499 AD. And he also estimated the length of the year, and we haven't done much better in the modern age. He estimated it to be 365.258605 days, so talk about exact. And
it's pretty exact.
Yeah, that's pretty exact. So he's a really kind of key figure there, but also in maths, of course, you see the arrival of Brahmanic mathematics. We've talked about this before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0, as 1 to 9 plus 0, developing the concepts of negative and positive, square and cube roots, solving quadratic equations, using trig and sine and all those things that you and I don't understand. And as I said before, we worked out the value of pi. They were involved in industrial chemistry, making soap, making cement, producing probably the world's first tempered steel. They worked on dyes, and they learned how to crystallize sugar. So lots of advances. But if you just think back to what we're talking about for astronomy and maths for the Islamic world, a lot of that stuff, remember, comes out of India. So. lots of advances there.
Very interesting stuff. And that does it for this part of our discussion on India. Join us again.